What's going on, everybody? This is the blockchain backer bringing you the latest cryptocurrency news and analysis. Today, we're going to have a very different video. Of course, looking here at the Bitcoin price chart and looking at the altcoin market and really the state of where we're at right now. I know there is a lot of confusion out there on what is going on in the market. Now that we are over 6 months removed from when the peak of the market came in back on March 14th for Bitcoin and for the altcoin market, we get this deep into this stuff and it's just a lot of mixed of fear and extreme fear. And certainly there's a lot of unknowns coming up with economic data and things that are coming here in the next few days, as we are 2 days away from getting the FOMC meeting, where the market is pretty divided on what's going to happen with the interest rate cuts. And of course, we've dove into the data for the last 25 years to show what happens to markets after rate cuts start. And a lot of that can create a lot of worry. And then when we look at things that are going on in the stock market, like with the Dow, the S&P, and the NASDAQ, all at these new highs, but we just can't seem to get the Russell 2000, the actual measurement of breadth and expansion in markets. We just can't seem to get this to cooperate and break out. It's stuck at these retracement levels. This big debate out there on, is this thing actually going to be able to get through, or is it going to reject from here? It creates a lot of noise, and it creates a lot of trying to solve all these interconnected puzzles and figure out what could happen in here on if this happens, if this president gets elected, if this rate cut is 25 basis points or 50 basis points, or if the Russell can get out, and all these different things to try to figure out what could happen. And there's no question, I probably spend way too much time trying to figure that out myself. And definitely for the last couple of months, probably overwhelmed myself with trying to figure out how to solve that puzzle. If this happens and that happens, then that's what can make that happen. That's what can get us to go into that. And then that's what can get the market to end up going. And a lot of times it can just be too much noise. And I've probably created too much noise even for myself with all of it to try to solve it. And so in the last several weeks, we've had markets in the morning. One of the questions in the last markets in the morning is, hey, why don't we try to find some downside targets? And the answer was, well, I don't really know of any downside targets to continue to be looking for because we've already gotten back to the last point of support over here. This seems like as good a place as any. And then we were bouncing around trying to find examples of that. And I'm like, where do I have this? I know I have this somewhere where we've talked about it. And I don't know why this has slipped from my mind for so long. Maybe it's because I haven't taken a vacation in a year. And my only vacation I did do ended up landing me and my family into the emergency room last month. But I've spent the last several days trying to figure out, all right, what was the thought heading into all of this that we've seen so far? What was the plan? What was the discussion when we're back in here before we take off? Why were we so vocal about the 702 Fibonacci retracement level heading into it? Why was the expectation that we would see irrational exuberance, euphoria, and extreme risk taking? Why, when we saw it, were we screaming about it the whole time? And what were the thoughts of what would happen at that moment? And so I've spent this weekend going back through old thoughts to see what were my thoughts heading into that moment before we saw the irrational exuberance, before we saw the euphoria, before the meme coin mania all happened. Why was I prepared to scream about the retracement levels when we were there? And what were my thoughts of what would happen afterwards? And that takes us back to a video that was published back on November 30th of last year. That was 29 minutes long, so it's one of my longer videos. In there were a lot of thoughts that were right. There were a lot of thoughts that were wrong. But the general idea of that we would see irrational exuberance, extreme risk-taking, and meme coins and euphoria from retail investors back at the 702 retracement was correct. And then pulling back down to these levels was correct. And I've spent time this weekend watching my own past videos from back then to try to refresh myself on my own thoughts and try to eliminate a lot of this noise that we see going on here in this high intense moment that's coming up in here, and counting the days on how long the longest expansions have been for Bitcoin and crypto, and just being like, hey, can we simplify this really quick and say, hey, look, a lot of these charts look very interesting. A lot of these charts look like they're at or near their bottoms. How could it possibly be that a lot of these charts are at or near these bottoms when there's all this economic concern happening out there, all this economic worry, when rate cuts are typically bad, and we're back here at this preliminary support? And I found it very refreshing to go back and watch this and to see before things got really emotional in the market, before things got really wild, before a lot of the narratives played out, before the Bitcoin ETFs played out, before Solana meme coins happened, before RWA and AI was massively huge. And to sit there and with a level-headed be able to say, here's what I kind of imagined happening, and then reflecting back on it of being like, wow, a lot of those things kind of did happen. A lot of them haven't, right? We obviously see the stock market really high. Structurally, a lot of things have played out. Bitcoin's definitely gone higher than I expected it would end up going. But we'll actually talk about that. And I think this video will be very, very eye-opening and hopefully makes a little bit of sense out of everything that we've seen happen in the market over the last 9 months. And so today's video is actually going to be quite long because we are going to go through this together, and we're having to go through a 29-minute video together. But I think it will help remove a little bit of the noise that's going on in there, and that where we're at right now, there's at least the potential to be looking for things to turn themselves around. So we're going to go through this whole thing, and I'll add commentary. But if you find yourself lost in this market, which sometimes even I do right now, especially with all this stuff coming up and waiting to see if this thing is going to do anything, that this provided a little bit of context to the vision and then looking at kind of what we've seen. And really, not everything in this vision has played out at all, but this did to the T. So I can tell you, after me going through these videos throughout the weekend, they helped me. And so hopefully this helps you. We'll jump right into the video. I'll take pauses and then we'll talk about it. But what we're going to see is a video that was recorded right in here with an expectation that we would go here and then right back down to where we are right now, and that we would not go into a bull run yet. However, it does not portray it as in doom time, game over, the market is done. It presents a case. And so that's what we're going to go through today. We're going to see the things that are right. We'll talk about them. We're going to see the things that are wrong. We'll talk about them. But let's go ahead and dive on in. Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is the Blockchain Backer, bringing you the latest cryptocurrency news and analysis. Today, we're going to be talking about the Bitcoin price chart. We're going to be talking about the altcoin market, more of like in a free flow fashion, as we're now at like the end of the month. It's the end of November. We're going to take a look over there at broader markets as we're about to get our monthly candle closes happening here in markets. And if you caught markets in the morning, there's a couple of really interesting monthly candles that are about to happen here. And of course, it's been really exciting over here for Bitcoin in October and in November after, most of the market participants got surprised when the breakout in October happened. November, we've still continued to chug on along here for Bitcoin. We closed out October at like 34,000. We're closing out November here very close to $38,000. And as the price of Bitcoin has continued to climb, we've talked about a lot of different things in here with Bitcoin, of the similarities of what it looks like to 2020. Probably getting sick of seeing this at this point because it's been over a month of really just kind of doing the same thing, just really kind of in that same kind of grind happening in here. But we've pointed to other things like how the price has behaved against like 2015 and 2016. Again, you've seen this 100 times at this point. But then, there's the scenario that we've also talked about for years where 38,000 is this big struggle zone for Bitcoin. If you look at Ethereum, when it did something very similar to this back in 2017 and 18, it's the same structure: crash, retrace, reaccumulation, full extension. Boom, all the way back down below the previous all-time high, off the 786 retracement level, right back up into the resistance, and off and away it went. That is what Bitcoin has done, right? It's pulled back to that 786 retracement level below the previous all-time high. We're back in that retracement level. We're back in that resistance zone. The big questions are like, all right, is that doomsday scenario up to bat right now? I've made YouTube videos about this. I've written newsletters about this and made Twitter posts over there for years, talking all about getting back to that retrace level. Nobody has this on their bingo card. And I've been showing this and quoting videos that I've done from back in April of 2022, before Luna collapsed, before Celsius, all the drama, before FTX, showing this exact thing, right? And that here we are right now, right? So the question is it this? Is it like 2020? Is it 2016? Right? There's so much complication on which one it is. And for the last year and a half, for me, it's always been like, hey, look, getting back to the retracement levels. Once we get back into retracement levels, the game becomes a whole lot more difficult. But when we're at the bottom, when everybody's screaming in fear and they're selling low to buy lower, it's easy for me to come on here and just be like, look, sellers are exhausted. Just like at tops, when everybody's greedy for 100K, that's usually a reversal. Just like bottoms, and everybody's greedy for 12K, that's going to be a reversal. And it's not until capitulation happens in there. And that can happen either way, right? Remember this? Everybody's screaming, just admit it's a bear market. Then they all capitulate back in to buy because they think we're going to 100K. Then they buy the whole way down, even they're like, nah, man, look, the December 5th or whatever it was, December 2nd, put out the video. It's a bear market. We're in a bear market for Bitcoin. No, you don't know anything. And then we get down here, everybody sells wanting to buy 12K, then they still want to buy 12K all throughout here. Now, of course, it's changing, right? So are they capitulated yet? I doubt it. I doubt everybody's capitulated, because you could see somebody could come out and just like throw out a huge bear post and it'll still get thousands of likes. So they still exist out there a little bit, not like they did, but there's still a little bit. I think any type of down, like it's one of those things where like they're a little nervous to come out and say anything because they'll get chastised by the community, because it'd be like, well, you've been wrong the whole time, right? Prices are up. So bears have to kind of like hide in their little corner here for a minute until price comes down, and then they come out. Just like we saw with, when Binance got the settlement done with the DOJ and CZ Binance is getting, whatever sentencings or he's getting, right? Some of the bears came out during that time, right? Saying, see, told you, now we go to 12K. Boom, it flips right back up to 38K. But I don't think we've like reached euphoria or anything over here in Bitcoin, which is what you're usually going to end up seeing when a reversal does happen. Everybody's unwavering confidence that we're going to go significantly higher. But, the great debate, 2016, 2020, or ultimate doom city. Again, for the last year and a half, I've been about retracements. I've thought the 12K stuff has been silly. So I'm willing to say at this exact moment in time, it's a difficult read, but I'm actually willing, I'm willing to guess on which one I think is the most likely. And while I think all three of them are totally viable, I think it'll actually be none of them. Now, if something showed up on the charts differently, I'd be willing to say, okay, never mind. This seems to be it. But with where we're at exactly right now, at $37,700, I'm willing to say I think it's none of them. Or that 2016 has really the best shot, but more of kind of like a modified version of 2016. It's the one I actually cheer for too. It's the one that actually provides like a long-term better picture for Bitcoin. And it's actually a little secret I've kept in my back pocket that I haven't really talked about much publicly. That made it very easy to be bullish for the last year and a half, while retail investors were bears the whole time. And it really comes back to just like what reversal structures look like. Really, what we looked like from the very top of the market in here, and what these reversals look like. If you remember this, if you were here during this time, you watched it, we pretty much cover this every day. You guys probably get sick of it. There becomes time periods we have to like review the same thing over and over and over again. In here, we did a lot of that, right? Because we've recognized this was a very common reversal structure that was happening in here, and that Bitcoin was definitely acting like a bear in here, because this is what bear price action does in moments like these, right? We had overlaid this here to show that this was the same price behavior for Bitcoin happening for some reason from the legitimate top. It was confusing at the time on why we would be getting that actually happening there from the actual top. But we did, and it was a very normal reversal structure. And what most people fail to realize is that we actually ended up doing the exact same structure here. This is the same reversal. The difference is you just have to look at it from the inverse perspective to see this is the same thing. It's the exact same reversal, and a common reversal structure happening right there from the same spot, right? And so where you put yourself at currently right now is as if, you're beyond here. We just spent 7 months working this sucker out right in here. And now we just kind of got a breakdown happening in here. So it puts you like right there on where the market is at currently right now, right? So you just get one more break, and then you just kind of chill out there for a little while. And then you go on for the last one to break down in there. What does this mean? So it would mean more of a structure that's kind of like this. It has one more push and then, right, garbage for quite some time. That would essentially mean that what do we end up doing? We end up going back into retracement levels, right? For Bitcoin, it goes back into the retraces. I don't know if we're going to get that high, but you get one more push into retraces, and then it's kind of a garbage year for the rest of the year, likely pulling back down to $30,000 to $32,000, essentially giving like that one last push. And so what happens when we get to one more push happening, or invert it back, one more push happening? That's the extreme end, right? That's where all of retail capitulates on being bearish, right? They all pull themselves in on being bullish, and we see a bunch of euphoria and a bunch of excitement happening in the market. And everybody's a bull, everybody's a winner, everybody's a genius, everybody's euphoric, everybody's in the green. All DCAers will be in the green, unless if you're like the guy who bought 65K and then never bought ever again. So everybody will be euphoric and excited and happy. Okay, this is a good time to go ahead and take a pause real quick. We're jumping live now. Now here we are in real life in September of 2024, and we've had price action play out now. And we can see how price played out in relation to that idea. And so we'll invert Bitcoin again and take a look at it and reflect back on when this video was recorded, which was right here on November 30th in this time period right in here. At the time, those thoughts were that we were working out one of these things. We actually did get that, but it wasn't yet. We were a little early on it. It came a little bit lower, or in the case of Bitcoin, a little bit higher, right? Then what happened? We had the final leg in order to complete the move with extreme excitement, everybody in profit, reaching the extent of what would be the end of a move, which is typical when retail pours in, retail gets really excited. That completes our move to then go on and now build a new range. So conceptually so far, that idea actually seems right. What was wrong? Well, the thought was that it wouldn't be able to take out the extent of the range, right? That it would end up being somewhat of a retracement happening in here, unable to actually clear out the previous range boundary, right? Retrace, right? And then that it would go into kind of trash. But it did it from higher. And that definitely caught me by surprise that we would get that high for something like that to occur. But what ended up happening is we got literally the exact same thing to play out in here. And then now here we are 6 months later, still stuck in here. So, okay, let's jump back into the November 30th video. When everybody's in the green, what do? They get risky. They've got profits. They're willing to throw them around, toss them around, act like fools. And that's usually when we see a lot of big moves happening over there in the altcoin market. And I do believe we're working on sign of strength, an accumulation schematic, a Wyckoff accumulation schematic that's going to head back up into higher levels. But then eventually, yuck. Probably a rough ride. And I think we actually see the confluence of this over there in Bitcoin structure in here, that there's like one more big push to come in the market, and then things just get ugly for about a year. That would also have confluence for exactly how these things happen, that we've had a big old crashing structure happen in here. I've talked about that a lot over here in the altcoin market. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rolls back up to wave 4 within wave 5. And then we go on for 7, right? So 6 and 7, and then you have a 1, 2, 3 ending. Then you have the ABC breakout, and then you go all the way up in here. And then you crash back down to the supports, right? So it's like we go all the way back up into those retracement levels really high, and then crash back down into the supports. And like an example of that would be this, right? So this is XRP. This is the crashing structure. Here's your ABC. Here's your torturous long period of getting out of there. Here you go. You work way up. You're working on sign of strength. And then you go for a big, fat, explosive move that really takes you all the way back up there, like we're talking about over here for the altcoin market. Then lights out. It pulls all the way back down, right? And this isn't a baby move over here, right? This is very aggressive. This is 55% back to the downside, back to back test those support levels of those breakouts, right? Holds those daily candle closes on there. But that's kind of what I imagine over here. We said 55% over there for XRP, right? That's the same kind of move we're talking about right in here. A big, aggressive, euphoric move happening in here right now, probably mixed with euphoria over there in the stock market at the exact same time, which we'll touch on here in a second, but also with euphoria of one more move over there for Bitcoin, as there's one more leg left in this thing to get into the retracement levels and see a big move happen in the altcoin market. The big question, of course, comes in, hey, is who's going to be the winners? Who's going to be the losers? Are some coins going to go into brand new all-time highs? Or some only going to go into retraces right now? I don't have that answer, but it definitely tells me we get into those retraces for me, and how I'm going to be communicating on this YouTube channel is if we do get this, the crowd will be wild. The crowd will be euphoric. The crowd will be excited. They will have all capitulated back into the market. No bear will be allowed to not be humiliated and chastised, as the crowd will know, you never knew anything, and we were always bull. But that's always what happens when you get back into retracement levels and then the crowd finally comes back in. We'll stop here really quick. We're back to September of 2024. That video is recorded in here. Here's that green box. We saw exactly that, right? We saw euphoria come in, irrational exuberance, extreme risk taking, all while happening up there at the 702 Fibonacci retracement level. Back to November we go. And so I think this is probably the most likely thing that I see currently right now in the market, is that I still believe we're actually going to end up just having a retrace happen for now, at least. The big question will end up being, well, what do we do after that, right? Do we have another retracement back down to the downside, and then can we recover from there? And I think that the big thing I'll be watching for in a pullback afterwards is going to be that big question of, can Bitcoin hold on top of supports like it always does in every recovery? And I think we'll pull back down to $30,000 to $32,000. And that'll be the big moment of, will Bitcoin hold this? And if Bitcoin does hold it, then I'll jump into the camp of thinking Bitcoin is starting a whole new super cycle. Let's go. But I think with that retest of that level, which if you don't think it's going to retest $31,000 to $32,000, you're kind of going against the grain of everything of what has ever happened. Like, it just says we will. Like, every recovery has always done that. All right, let's talk about that really quick. Back to September of 2024. That discussion is of this particular price level, which has never been retested. Why was that thought there in the first place, that this level needed to be retested? That is because for every cycle for Bitcoin, for every new expansion to take place, we always come back and test breakout support levels before expansions take place. That is what happened here in 2012. You would come back and backtest your range before actually breaking out into expansion. That is what happened in 2015, 16, and 17. Every single level gets backtested before it can go off. You can see that in here, that all these different levels, they always get backtested. And then even in 2020, when C19 happened, we had a massive breakout off of the lows that was backtesting the prior breakout. So it's very inconsistent to continue going and never backtest a level. And still to this day, that is still wide open. And we'll be talking about that later. So back to the video from November, and what we're talking about is a backtest here happening on top of that level. And it would be very consistent with something like this happening over there in the altcoin market. So I definitely am still in the camp that an exciting moment is coming for this market. And I think some coins will probably have significant winning. Some will probably underperform and be disappointing, because that's just what we see happen in this market. The animal spirits flock in certain ways. And I, of course, have been spending a tremendous amount of time trying to solve that puzzle of which ones end up getting the most juiced. I've put countless hours into it. I've traveled to Austin, Texas. I've tried to do my best to understand what happened in 2021. We've talked about developer data. We've talked about percentage drawdowns. I just put out a newsletter today talking about the inflationary rate of altcoins and that impact on their returns. This one's got a 28-minute audio recording to go with it too, if you want to hear the silky smooth blockchain backer voice narrate it to you. But all of these factors seem to have mattered. Development data, inflationary rates, percentage drawdowns on how big the recovery was that they could have. While, of course, we would all like to scream and holler and say, give us the biggest alt season of our lives right now, this scenario doesn't give us that, right? This scenario gives us a big retrace. It gives us euphoria. It gives us excitement. It gives us probably hundreds of % gains on lots of different stuff. But it doesn't send you into a super mega bull run for the whole market right now. I'm willing to be wrong on that. I'm willing for the market to go absolutely, completely nuts and crazy. But I also have to kind of prepare for this, right? That if I'm right, if my whole theory that I've always had is that we go into a retracement and either the altcoins go absolutely ballistic or either they don't, at that moment, it's going to be a defense moment for me at that point of removing capital out of the markets. And I'm going to do that regardless of where things get to. If assets hit like 4.236 extensions early, boom, I'll pull it out. If everything's coming up short, but we've got the altcoin market caps back into like 618 or 702 retracements, boom, that just is what it is. That's what the market's going to do. I can't control it. I'm pulling. But I think one of the hardest things we've been watching in here is trying to figure out, well, what's the structure of this going to be? Is it going to be like this? Is it going to be like 2020? And I think there could be some curveballs that come with it that I'm not willing to like let myself get panicked about. The first thing I would say, if we see a move like this over here in Bitcoin and we go down into like the 34,000s, that would be my first signal to me that I would say, I don't think we're doing what we did in 2020, where we just go shooting straight up to the highs and everything is euphoric and majestic at that moment. Merely losing all of those higher lows and going down into the 34s, I'd go ahead and wipe that off. But the question is, if we do that, does that automatically mean we're doing 2016 right now and we're shifting our way back down to the lows? And the point of this is to say, I don't think it really says that is the case either. I think it could be trickery in that it actually does get up there into those retracement levels, potentially the ETF, right? All those guys are saying the ETF is the most bullish thing in the world. No way. That's a sell the news event for me, especially if we do it right back into retracement levels. And we also do know that the 702 retracement level for Bitcoin resides on its market cap exactly at $1 trillion market cap for Bitcoin. And that's crazy, right? The $1 trillion price point for Bitcoin is the 702 Fibonacci retracement level on its market cap. For the price chart, it puts it at like $51.5, $52,000. But I think it's very possible we see some trickery like this. And it's a difficult thing right now, of course, because everybody's sitting here waiting. We're all watching this thing just go in this slow grind. It's like, well, here's this scenario, here's that scenario, here's this, that, and this. And like, it just keeps grinding. And I'm willing to like have all of my different invalidations and saying, well, I don't think it's doing this one. I don't think it's doing that one. I don't think it's doing this one. But as of right now, while we just continue that grind, how do you eliminate any of them, right? How do you eliminate that? How do you eliminate 2020, right? And there would have to be specific things that occur because all of these, right where it's at right now, all four of them could be valid. And we just need simple moves. We just need simple breaks. A simple break to the downside, well, immediately we say, all right, 2020 is out the window. Just a removal of higher highs and higher lows. Boom. A continued break to the upside, getting through $38,000 to $40,000 and just chugging along. We say, oh, well, it looks like that whole Ethereum Doomtown scenario. Boom, that looks like it's out the window. And then, if we break down and then just keep going and we get back to 31.5, right? It's like, okay, well, it looks like we're going to be here a long time. There's a lot of simple things that could happen on this chart to say which one is going to be the one that ends up playing out. But while you sit in here waiting, you just don't have anything giving you a clue to say which one could it be. And it's kind of like waiting for saying, hey, look, like these are my invalidation levels or these are my validation levels. And if these particular things happen from here, this is the direction I'm going to lean pretty quickly and which one I'm going to eliminate. But if I had to make my absolute best guess on what I think is going to happen in this market, I think that's likely the most likely thing to happen in here. We invalidate 2020. We then go on to the retracement levels. You then see the altcoin market absolutely explode. You see some altcoins be big winners. You see some absolutely sad and pathetic. We see the absolute euphoria of the market, and then it all comes tumbling right back down. Okay, here we are back to September of 2024. I've gone ahead and rewound the price action to put us back onto November 30th of last year to talk about that. And that idea of being like, hey, we pull back down here, and then we have the euphoria moment happen, and that altcoins go off into that. Why was that idea right there? Why was it that was my thought and that this would be different from stuff that we've seen before, but that this is how I imagined it playing out? Essentially, I was looking for this to already play out in here and that we were working on something like this. However, I was early. We were actually still right in here and price action ended up going to the upside, still continuing in here before that move ended up playing out, which happened from a higher level rather than from that level. And so we're going to see this happen in here. It comes up, and then eventually we end up getting the kerplunk to end up happening from there. Then what happened? We go off into the euphoria. We go from this moment, and then head into the euphoria, which was what the idea was. It just happened from a further along place than that. Because this part right here, we go ahead and you can inverse that to see That's where we were at the time. Then we go into the euphoria. We see the altcoin market go and hit the 702 retracement, and that's it. So conceptually, the idea was there. I was just a little bit early on it here back in November, thinking that while we were in here, that we were already working on it, and that move down before the euphoric moment would happen was going to come a lot sooner than it did. And that, of course, ends up leading to Bitcoin even going higher than my expectations of what it would be, even though conceptually it's still all the same stuff and the altcoin market goes back and hits the 702 retracement. But let's go ahead and jump back into the November video. And there's a potential it all happens with the United States stock market, which is right on the verge of having a monthly candle close in 30 minutes from me recording right now. I'll have to edit this thing and change it all if it doesn't close this way. But we're going to have the highest close here for the Dow Jones Industrial Average dating back to December of 2021, right? We've shown the roaring 20s, the Great Depression. What does it do? It just gets up there to the 4.236 extension and then lights out happens after that. And I could imagine something like that happening in there and that we end up having boom, right? All right, let's take a break there for a second. Here we are back in September of 2024. We're live. Let's talk about that. Ironically, when Bitcoin does hit its top and the altcoin market does hit its top, it does happen as the Dow Jones is at the 4.236 extension. However, it's wrong because the Dow then still continues to go higher while Bitcoin and the crypto market continue to pull back. And then the big $1 million question for crypto at that moment in time would be, can the support hold? Can Bitcoin support hold? And if they can, and if they can't break through these things and go tumbling down to the downside, then it opens up this door of like, maybe we are starting a whole new cycle for crypto. Again, I've always been that advocate if we're only getting a retrace, right? I still think we're only getting a retrace for the market caps and for Bitcoin. And then I think we're going to get a really, really big crash. But then the question is, will it hold? And if it holds, 2024 probably be another consolidation year, just like Bitcoin does. It tends to consolidate much longer when it's in these recoveries. And like to give you like a cleaner example, rather than using Bitfinex, we'll go back in here using Bitstamps. And I'll show you this, that we know this is where we are. We're this deep into this thing. We've just now stepped out of the next range, right? But even if you stepped out of this range, right, started from here, where does it take you to? Well, it gets you way up here. What is that? $53,000. Then what happens? A big crash back down to 31, like we're talking about right in here. That's not out of line. That's not crazy. It comes with a majestic moment in time of euphoria. That's very quick. I mean, you can look here, right? That's like, if that kicks in, that could happen in a week. You could have something like that happen in a week. This whole insanity right here, this is 3 days, right? 3 days. Boom, right? I don't think it's going to be that quick, but just kind of understanding, right? It still retraces. It still retraces. There's going to be winners. There's going to be losers. I think there's confluence there for Bitcoin to get that retracement. I think the structure of how it gets there, I think we're all looking to 2020 and there's no question it looks like 2020 happening in here, but I just wouldn't be surprised as well if there is some move like this right in here showing it's not 2020 and then rams up and then back down. And that would have confluence with an event like this happening in here, and then followed by a crummy 2024 where it's just really tightening itself up. It's consolidating for then something bigger to come potentially in 2025. So it's optimistic for a moment like that to come right now, because this is crazy, right? This is crazy to see the Dow Jones Industrial Average going and taking out the height set back there over there in August. Again, I still think this is totally distribution over here on the Dow Jones Industrial Average. This is the exact same type of distribution we saw in the cryptocurrency market in 2021. This is just stretching out over years of distribution. I think that's what's happening in here. But it doesn't mean it can't lead to a whole lot of excitement in the market. But when excitement comes, it's the same thing every time. The bulls get very cocky. They chastise bears. They become greedy and they become irresponsible, reckless, and risky. So things you can usually look for is meme coins, right? If we start seeing new meme coins coming out, people throwing money around like absolute nonsense, that's typically the sign we have reached max riskiness, max recklessness, and irresponsibility. And I don't think we're there yet. I still think this thing's going to break out and go, but just being prepared, like that phase, like the reason I even have to make this video in the first place is because I genuinely believe there's going to be like this crazy exciting moment that happens relatively quickly whenever it does, right? It could take another month for that moment to happen, But I know that those moves can come in an explosive fashion, and that when it does, if it does, I'm going to like pretty dang quickly be like, okay, I'm selling stuff, right? And it'll catch a lot of people by surprise because they're going to be like, wait a minute, this thing just started. Why would you be selling anything? We just started. And it's like, it didn't just start. It's been a year and a half of telling you this is what's happening. We're now just reaching max euphoria. Okay, let's play that audio again and let's talk about that vision of what that would be like and what the market would look like at that time. So I'm going to keep it on this chart, but I'm going to replay just a clip of audio we just heard a second ago. But when excitement comes, it's the same thing every time. The bulls get very cocky, they chastise bears, they become greedy, and they become irresponsible, reckless, and risky. So things you can usually look for is meme coins, right? If we start seeing new meme coins coming out, people throwing money around like absolute nonsense, that's typically the sign we have reached max riskiness, max recklessness, and irresponsibility. That is a legitimate description of exactly what we did end up seeing 3 months later as we got back to the retracement level. It is an identical description of the exact behavior that happened in the cryptocurrency market. If you issued warnings or were bearish there, you were chastised. And we also saw extreme risk taking and Solana meme coins go absolutely nuts and a tremendous amount of irresponsible behavior with that, right? I think we all know that. A marker of tops over the last couple of years has historically been those meme coins. And we wrote a newsletter back on April 30th going through specific sectors to talk about what did well. And there were essentially two different pumps that happened through the market. There was a pump that lasted from late October to early January, where the entire market took place in that pump. But then from January through March, it was much more muffled and became much more sector specific, where layer ones, layer twos, and DeFi did not partake at the same level as sector specifics did, such as AI, gaming, and what do you know, meme coins. Meme coins were actually quite muffled during the first run-up, but it was the second run-up where meme coins go crazy, which happens here. All right, back to November we go. So I don't know, this is kind of more of like a ramble at the end of the month video, but I just wanted to kind of show you the things that are going through my head. And nothing has changed with my thoughts on us going into retracements, but I thought I would just kind of ramble about my thoughts on it for some time here. No structure really, but just kind of talk, I guess, about the psychology of it, my thoughts. Like, I know when we get there, it'll become one of the, like, right, what did we just spend all this time doing? Pretty much telling the 12Kers they were nuts, right? You're crazy. It's not going to happen. You want 23K? You want 23K? It's not going to happen. You're crazy. But having been in this space and making YouTube content for a very long time, the same thing happens at tops. If I say I'm buying at bottoms, they say you're nuts, you're wrong. If you're selling at tops, they say you're nuts and you're wrong too. And we would approach that phase. So I'm kind of just like preparing the world to say, hey, look, I'm going to tell you when I'm doing it. I'm going to verbally say it, and I will get pushback. And I'm just letting you know, letting you be prepared for it. A lot of people are going to be super emotional, right? It's just what they are. Are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure you know what you're doing? No, of course not. I'm trying to play the odds here. I'm making my best educated guess. So far, my educated guess has been correct. The thing is, I think we're also going to struggle in retracement levels, and I'm going to take some risk off the table because I think we're going to fall all the way back down afterwards. But then I think we're going to have some fun. I think we're going to consolidate. There'll be some stuff that like shoots off during a moment like that, some stuff that's just sad and pathetic. And I think, I'm spending all this time really researching this stuff, trying to figure out these inflation rates, these dev datas, these percentage drawdowns, because I think this stuff is important. And I just don't think there's going to be a tremendous amount of time to make a decision on it. There is data you can get educated on. And a lot of the stuff I've just given to you for free. I had sentiment on Friday. I showed you all that stuff. I've told you that percentage drawdowns matter. The shallower a drawdown is, the more likely it is to go off into new all-time highs. And inflation, like we all know it. Don't go after stuff that's really high in inflation. But I think the thing that will surprise you is that the whole Bitcoin narrative of the halving and going down to a 0.875 inflation rate, and that's going to be the thing that sends it off into a bull run. The data doesn't say that that is actually that important, that that type of inflation rate is that important. And there's actually sweet spots of inflation. I think a lot of these coins know what they're doing with their inflation levels. Some of them, I think they have no clue. If you have 40% inflation, 50% inflation, you are absolutely devastating your project. You're devastating your coin. You're diluting your market cap and you're crushing people who own the coin. But you don't have to have a negative deflationary rate. You don't have to have 2%, 1%. You don't have to. There's very nice sweet spots in there. And it's just important to do that research, understand that, and have a couple of things to go after. So I'm prepared, man. I'm ready to have some fun. I think we're going to go into this hopefully we go into the end of this year and it's just kind of absolutely a madhouse here at the end of the year as we go into December. And let me comment on these squigglies too really quick, okay? I don't know how long that will take. I don't know if it would look more like, hey, we just go straight up, straight down, we wobble here and there, and then we're out in just a few months, weeks, whatever. This is just what your structure typically looks like. It's what like we talk about a lot, like a contracting triangle, where you have a crash, retrace, reaccumulation that happens in here. That's my thoughts of what I'll be looking for a big pullback is a crash, retrace, reaccumulation. But I do have absolutely no clue how long the time frame would be. I know I said, hey, crummy 2024. Maybe it's only 3 months. I don't know. We'll have to see it when it kind of starts to play out, if it does end up playing out. But like on things like XRP and structures, when we see this is usually that level where you can measure a 4.236 extension from in here and then go on and try to get into those zones, because that's what ends up happening in here, right? Crashing structure breaks out, violently backtests back to the breakout level, then does the typical 702 Fibonacci retracement, right? Crash, retrace, reaccumulation, boom, off and away it goes. And that would be a pretty big move. And that's typically what happens after the crashing structure, just like this. It's that we break from it, back into retracement levels, build a contracting triangle in here, and then fib extension it. And so that's what I'm looking for. The time frame of how long that would take, that I don't know. But these are my thoughts. I'll get all of that off the screen and well, all right, that's it. A super ridiculously long ramble video that pretty much is telling you I'm excited about the market. I think we're going to have some crazy YOLO fun here, but I know how this market works. Crashes always come after the YOLO fun. They come after the euphoria. And what happens with most people is they do believe this time is different when we're in the middle of it. But I won't do that. I'll keep the level head. I'll communicate my level-headedness here on the YouTube channel, and might have some good times coming pretty soon. So, all right, that's going to be it. And that concludes that video. Now here we are in September of 2024, and we've pretty much had everything play out. That in those scenarios, you could see a 55% drawdown happen in the market after hitting the 702 Fibonacci retracement level, essentially getting right back to here. We saw a wick happen on August 5th that took it down to 58%, and then, of course, recovers it right on that same day. Still just continuing to hover around in here on top of the preliminary support that was set back there in May of 2022. So removing all the noise of the market, of the Fed funds rate, of the stock market, so far, that particular idea seems to have panned out in relation to the crypto market. We did not see an expansion happening in the United States stock market. We still have not seen an expansion happen in the United States stock market. And in order for crypto to go into an expansion, it has been mandatory for breadth and expansions to happen in the US stock market. So, of course, we had not been seeing that. And that's why I really just kind of stuck to those guns on the retracement happening in there. When it came to Bitcoin, structurally, it did do exactly that. The thing is, it just went a little bit higher, right? Which, once again, supposed to be a retracement happening in here, instead getting to a high, which is, again, that odd behavior that we saw from back in 2021, that this is the depths of a bear market. Yet it's set a new high in here, unlike in the past, right? So we keep seeing that kind of weird behavior happening in Bitcoin, but structurally, really quite on point to what would happen. But now, essentially, what would all this mean if this idea were to still continue to play out? Essentially, that we are just in trash, but that this market, the altcoin market, is trying to find supports to hold on top of the preliminary support, and the vast majority of the downside action is likely already completed. This style of price action would insinuate that eventually Bitcoin goes higher potentially to something like 100,000 or 110,000. The problem is figuring out when that could happen. And if we have to go lower from where we are right now before that can happen. And with this in particular, I still remained a little bit indifferent on it because we typically see backtests end up happening before we end up going off into bull runs for Bitcoin. And that wide open gap down there at $30,000, $32,000 still remains wide open. We can look kind of at this price action to see where this ends up pulling back to before things get up going. And as we can see, like even discussed when that video was recorded, that's back over here. Back in here, right? This thing breaks down. This thing breaks down. But eventually it goes back to close that gap. And that gap is way over here. Again, $30,000. Alternatively, I could sit here and say, well, we saw the fib retracements on this thing. It wasn't very much. It really just went back and did a little bit over a 382 Fibonacci retracement level in here, and that was good enough. Whether it was that mattered or the retracement level, and then you look at it from this context and say, well, how much of a retracement have we done in here? Well, sure enough, we've actually done that. We've gone back to the 382 back in here already with that action. So I'm indifferent on that in particular. And I'm not sure, at least at this time, that I could confidently guess on that without just having like a strong argument. I don't think I have a super strong argument to sit here and say it has to go back here or that's good enough. I don't think my argument is strong enough to present either one at this time. Maybe that changes in a week. Maybe that changes tomorrow. Today, I don't have it. However, with the altcoin market, I see us trying to work out a bottom in here. And I do see the potential for another small flush down in here on a few individual altcoins just by doing wave counts on them. For example, this is Crow. I don't own this coin. I have no intention of buying this coin because I just don't buy exchange coins. But I can definitely count out a crashing structure that is near completion happening in here, and that the bulk of the whole move is really done. And we've done crashing structures on these things many times before, but we can do the perfect count happening in here of 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for the fifth wave, wave 6, back to wave 4 of the fifth wave. And then what do you end up doing? You end up doing 7, and that marks the bottom in here. We've spoken about Matic in here as well, and I see that happening in here as well, that we can count 5 waves that have happened down in here back to wave 4, and that there could be a flush down here to take it down to actually test its support. If that's the case, that would mean there's some kind of flush that's going to happen in the market, and you don't actually have all of these same charts throughout the whole market. Things like Sweet don't look anything like that, right? But I see that in like various little spots throughout the market, which of course nobody wants to hear, oh no, well, more happening in there. But believe me, I'd much rather see it clearly and say, hey, like I see light at the end of the tunnel than to just kind of be waffling back and forth like I have been with a lot of uncertainty. To be like, hey, look, this is what we were looking for. This is where we're at. This is what we've got. We've got these structures happening in here in various places. It doesn't look like all altcoins have this structure, but if we were going to have like one more little flush happening in here, some stuff won't set new lows, but some stuff might. And that would be completions of structures happening on here, like the crashing structure on here, which you guys should be familiar with by now. So I see light at the end of the tunnel. And I wanted to show you like my thoughts, like when we were in last year before we got to the euphoria and what it was like when we got there. And like I broadcasted that, hey, when we get there, I'm going to be like this. I'm going to be blah, blah, blah. I'm selling stuff. And I did that all through March and all of April in newsletters, live streams, videos, PCBacker.com. I'm building a cash position. I said it like every single day. As we were heading back down, it got a little more confusing. And I took a stab here and then got stopped out here and then made my entries in here and have just been sitting tight since. The August 5th crash, of course, all comes in throughout here where the stock market crashes and the VIX explodes to C19 levels. But otherwise, just kind of sitting tight here throughout this time period at this point. So got in a little bit early. I think even probably I thought, it's not going to do it. It's not going to go that low. Well, sure enough, it did in epic fashion. So as of right now, what I'm looking at in the market is to be trying to build a base down in here for the altcoin market as we've reached back to preliminary supports. looking for signs of Bitcoin to start trying to work its way out, or if it has to go back and give a bigger backtest happening in here. Now, earlier I said in this type of structure, 100 or 110K. The reason for that is because if we're in something like this, it can tend to be a measured move of the same size for the next leg to mark the low. And that was true for Bitcoin in here of being a measured move of the previous move, that they were nearly equivalent. So a move of that magnitude, if it were to happen from the current low right now, is something like, 107, no, 100, 110. Bitcoin does go down lower and Bitcoin does close that gap. Well, that number shifts down dramatically, right? Then it comes all the way back down to here and it's only like 89. So we still have to see this thing play out and when this thing can eventually start getting itself moving. But I think that, the theme of a lot of this stuff and all we're talking about, and like only getting back to a retracement level for the altcoin market and for Bitcoin to do this type of behavior, it's because this behavior is different. This is a different market from what we have seen historically. There has never been a time where you spend this much time in price drawdowns to try to go back into a recovery, and especially for the altcoin market, to get rejected by the 702. That's not historically what ends up happening. It just doesn't. Typically, we get back that high, and by the time you get that high, what was everybody looking for? They're looking for the banana zone. And instead saying, I don't think it's going to happen this time. And the reasons why is because the market is very different. And it stems back to those things we're talking about with the United States stock market. No breadth, 401ks aren't going, the Russell isn't going. It doesn't mean they won't go later, but they just weren't going now. And I've by no means been perfect, but there's a complexity to this market that is different from past cycles, and everyone's relying on past cycles. And I do believe we're seeing something different. And that is the whole reason why we ended up going back to the 702 and then crumbling back down in there. And that's why I had that vision in the first place. And to imagine what that would have looked like back in 2020 and 21, it'd be like getting back in here. And instead of going to banana zone, we pull all the way back down to here, right? That's what ended up happening. We came back to the preliminary support, unlike entering into banana zone in 2021. It's a different market. And it's because I think we're getting some different things to play out in here. And I don't think it's like entirely impossible to figure out, because I think it is something along the lines of this that is occurring in here, but it's not something the market is used to having happen. And that's why for 6 months, we've seen nothing on Twitter about Bitcoin to 100K any day now. It's that I just don't think we're playing the same game this time. I don't think it's a game that's never been played before. I think it can resolve itself and range build and then go. But that's still not something we're used to seeing happening in this market. It's not unheard of. I've shown charts like this before. This is how things can play out. But this is just definitely not what the market expected. And we saw the retail euphoria. We saw the excitement. And one day in the future, we'll see that all again. We'll know the signs to look for. If you had forgotten what it was like back in 2021, you got a real big glimpse of it again here in March and April of 2024. Irrational exuberance, extreme risk-taking, chastising of bears, and meme coins. Don't forget it. Those will show up again. They always do. But if there's a time to kind of be optimistic and say, look, we're back here. We've made it. The path forward could still be rangy. And the path forward for Bitcoin, we still need to see a little bit more happen over here. But if you have a big enough time frame looking out into the future, things seem like they could be okay. So that's really the messaging I kind of want to portray in this heat of the moment, that even for me, it's been very intense knowing we're going into this environment here pretty soon. And we just haven't gotten the Russell to break out yet. And I think it just hasn't been time yet. So like I said at the beginning of the video, hopefully it's provided a little bit of context, a little bit of clarity, a little bit of vision. It helped me to go back and rewatch this stuff and see this again and kind of get rid of a lot of the noise. There's just so much noise right now that even I'm focusing on and maybe paying too much attention to, that it really just kind of going back to the basics of just the structures of what has happened in here. So I hope you enjoyed this. I know I did. This time has been different. And we kind of went into it with a thought that maybe we would see something different. Not necessarily that we got really everything right about it, but some of the things we did, and the market has behaved differently than what we've seen before. But I wanted to play all that for you and get you into that mindset of just where I have been coming from, but also to look at it through that lens of being like, hey, look, when those ideas were all formulated and those expectations were set, and then that psychology of the market did play out, it was not an end of the world scenario, right? It was just that it would be a rough 55% correction afterwards. We've seen that. That's not what the market expects in this. They expected banana zone. We didn't get it. Doesn't mean it can't come next. It's just we're playing a different ball game now. That's why Bitcoin hasn't gone into expansion. Bitcoin hasn't gone into a bull run. Doesn't mean it won't, but we're just kind of in that trash zone right now. And that's very different from what the market has seen before. So it's certain to be an exciting week. This is the week where the Fed is going to start cutting. As I've been working on this video all day, we're now to 61% odds of a 50 basis point rate cut and a 39% odd of only 25 basis points. That's never happened before. By the time we've gotten to the meeting, there's pretty unanimous consent on which way the Fed is going to act. So we're seeing something very different when it comes to what market participants are believing and what the market is pricing in when it comes to the Fed this Wednesday. But of course, we'll live stream it all. We'll be there for the big event and tune in for that on Wednesday. Otherwise, I posted a newsletter over here yesterday. This time is different, and it might finally be good for Bitcoin, crypto, stocks, and the Fed navigating it. Check it all out. It really talks about a lot of the things that have been different this time around. It includes a 36-minute audio recording with this one. That's quite a long one. Of course, if you sign up for the newsletter, you get access to all the past ones as well. You can check this out over here on blockchainbacker.substack.com. Of course, you could check out bcbacker.com with over 40 videos and 11 hours of content teaching you how to set up your own charts and your own indicators within TradingView and CoinTrader Pro, and teaching you about the historical behavior of the cryptocurrency market. There are links in the description of this video to bcbacker.com and to the newsletter at blockchainbacker.substack.com. Otherwise, I hope you had a great weekend. Get ready for a crazy week as it is cutting cycle week. But all right, I'll check in with you next time. Thank you so much for watching. If you could, please like this video and give it a thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you can be notified of when I create new content and when I go live. As always, this is not investment advice and I am not a financial advisor. But if you ever need a pick-me-up or a little bit of reassurance, just remember that the blockchain backers got your back. Have a good one.